This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
When investigators opened the front trunk of a Tesla, they didn't just uncover a body, they uncovered a snapshot of panic. Of course, we're talking about the David case and the Celeste body in there, the kind of impulsive split-second decision that says more about psychology than actual planning. A 14-year-old girl, a 20-year-old musician, and a choice that makes no rational sense. We don't even know if he's the one who put it in there, but we know the vehicle was registered to him. Hiding a body in a car, registered to one's own name. It's not criminal genius. It's not the collapse of judgment. Something we see over and over again when young people make catastrophic choices that destroy lives in an instant. And, well, David was surrounded by other young people that seemed to be very good at making catastrophic choices in an instant. Today, we're joined by psychotherapist Siobhan Scott, unpacking the psychology of that decision, the why behind these senseless choices, and what the developing brain has to do with all of it. Siobhan, welcome. Obviously, there's a lot of questions here. Still in this case, we don't know who put the body in the trunk. No one has been charged in this case whatsoever. We don't even know exactly how she died yet, but somebody thought this was a good idea. Let's start with the basics. When we talk about impulsivity and poor decision making in young people, what's actually happening in the brain here? How does the prefrontal cortex, or the lack of it in full development, affect the judgment of those making these critical decisions in critical moments, whoever made this choice?
Yeah, it's a really good point. You know, we can separate the brain into different parts, and we often use a kind of an oversimplified model of the triune brain. Mm-hmm. But you've got the primitive brain, which is the brainstem, and that's what keeps your heart beating, keeps you breathing, keeps your basic motor skills going. Then you've got that emotional center of the brain, which is moving up toward the front, and that emotional center of the brain has all your emotions and your drives and your neurohormonal system, right? But then you've got the prefrontal cortex, which is the very last part to develop in the brain and the last part to evolve in mammals. And that's what we call the thinking brain. That's where you get judgment, impulse control, and your ability to analyze facts and situations and make plans, the executive part of the brain. And that is, unfortunately, the last part of the brain to develop. So you've got this emotional center on the brain, on high-powered hormonal influences, everything's cooking in there. But this thinking part of the brain, the part that can say, hey, stand back, think about this, take another course of action, maybe this isn't the right thing. That part of the brain doesn't really come online until about 25, which is why we see so many young people doing really stupid things. Now, I think a case could also be made that for some people, it never really does come online. And that's the person with chronic problems. And often you see that with people who become criminals. It's sort of like the thinking brain just never really plugged in there. You know, we'll often talk about criminal psychopaths as if they're some kind of geniuses. You know, they've got this criminal superpower. In truth, most of them are pretty darn stupid and make stupid mistakes.
Is there something that happens that stunts the growth of this? I mean, and we're talking like physical growth here to a certain extent, but is there something, when you're talking earlier, like some folks where it never comes online, it seems, are there things that can inhibit that from ever coming online? That could be outside things such as chemicals, drugs, alcohol, things of that nature, but also environmental things as well, conditional things as well, ways that one may be living their life. I'm curious about all of that. Let's start with the physical things that one could end up putting in their body that could do that, and then let's move on to more conditional, situational type things.
Yeah, great question, because things going all the way back to birth birth trauma to the head at birth can cause problems in maturation of the brain and the frontal lobes not developing right. You mentioned substances can certainly impair brain development. And the way that kids are parented influences it. So you can encourage kids through lots of problem solving, encouraging them to talk things through. So it's a combination of the environment, toxins in the environment, injuries to the head or the brain, going all the way back to birth. And so sometimes there are substances that a mother might ingest during pregnancy that affect the brain development of her fetus and ultimately the child that she produces. So there's so many variables with it.
Kind of makes you wonder how any of us turn out to be somewhat quote unquote normal at this point, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it seem like there should be more psychopaths walking the earth based on those variables?
Secret, there is.
Thanks, Tony.
Surprise! They just don't all act out. Am I accurate in that statement, Siobhan?
I think so. I think
God.
I think full-blown psychopaths with all the terrible qualities that psychopaths have that are extreme are not that common. But
Sure.
People who are on the continuum with some psychopathic behavior, I think about 30% of the human population has to some degree some significant psychopathic traits. There's a book out, and I just started reading it this week. It's been out for a few months, called Murderland. And it's a fascinating book. If true crime people like to read these kind of things, I would recommend it. But the theory behind the book is that why did the Pacific Northwest produce Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer and all these other, apparently we have more than our share of them up here where I live in the Pacific Northwest. Mm-hmm. And going into the history of the industrialization of this part of the country with all the mills and the smelters and all the stuff that was happening, things became incredibly polluted back in the 40s and 50s.
Well, you've got nuclear out there too.
Yeah, that wasn't identified because she was going back in her research to the 40s and 50s, and the specific toxins were lead and arsenic. But that really impacts little children developmentally, and she makes the case that this could have impacted the brain. I'm not done with the book yet, so I don't know how well she wraps it all up together, but it's a very interesting book. But again, going back to, does our environment affect brain development, and ultimately why people end up with poor judgment or impaired decision making?
I know. I mean, a lot of people, I think, are looking at this David case, and everybody runs everything through their filter of how would I have done it. Right. And I think a lot of adults will look at this and go, whoever did this. And I think the assumption is it was probably somebody in the circle of David or Dave. Nobody knows who it is, but somebody likely in that ring, because they were close. And if we look at the circle, they're all pretty much young people, very young people. So somebody made the decision to put that body in that trunk. We don't know if it was out of fear of, and we don't know the motive. That's the thing. Was it fear of being caught? Was it fear of whatever it may have been? Was she murdered? Was it self-inflicted? All those questions we don't know the answers to. But when you go to that, everybody's going, well, when I was that age, I wouldn't have thought that way. I would have been smart enough not to do that. I myself, when I run that through, I wouldn't have put a body in a trunk if you were in that sort of a situation, no matter what. That, like, somebody's dead, accident, on purpose, whatever the hell it is. I don't see any way where one goes, well, I'll just hide it in the trunk and this will be a great resting place. Right. We'll totally get away with it. And so that runs through the filters. But is it, I mean, obviously everybody develops a bit different in terms of their prefrontal cortex and these types of decision making. Is there something here that we can look at more tangibly and say, okay, the folks who are thinking this way, this is part of a greater picture. This is part of a greater picture of development of these large groups of people. It felt like there was usually a couple in the group that were pretty stupid, that would have thought, yeah, trunk's a great idea, let's do it. But usually wasn't the collective group as a whole that was making absolute horrible decisions. There was usually somebody in those groups back then that would be, no, guys, let's do this. Yeah, that makes more sense. It feels like that's absent from a lot of youth today. And I guess that's the big question is why does it feel so different when we're looking at and interacting with folks of this age? Not all of them by any means, but it feels like numbers far greater than there was even 10 years ago in terms of just having what most would just call common sense.
Yeah, I can't speak to data. You know me, I always go, if I'm going to say it, I want to say I have data on it. And I don't have any data on our young people getting dumber in this way.
Right.
I'd say observationally they are. but yes, I don't have any data on it either.
Yeah.
But, well, and I guess the question is, is it so... Because there's different ways, obviously, of looking at intelligence, and dumb, stupid, that's a very relative term. But, is it where it's accelerating in areas that we hadn't in the past, and then in this area over here, we're missing something of a connection to humanity, it feels like is missing in a lot of people, a lot of young people, when you talk to them about stuff, just the lack of, I guess, understanding or empathy for fellow human beings. That I mean, I see it in my own world. I see it with, I have a daughter who's 13. It's interesting to see the way she reacts to things. It's interesting to hear how her friends react to things. And some of it just seems very cold and extremely callous. Like, far colder and callous than I remember people being not all that long ago.
It feels like the empathy is gone. And I can't put my finger on what's happened. Is it because we had a pandemic and pulled some of these kids out of socialization for a number of years, and now they, things that they were seeing were on screens, so they weren't seeing in-person reactions and things like, I don't know. It just feels like people are not as empathetic as they used to be. Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
It's certainly a concern, the lack of empathy, that I think internet culture can also fuel it with the kinds, and again, depending on what, not that the internet's a bad thing. I spend a lot of time on the internet, as you guys know, but it depends on what you're looking at. And is there a lot of content that people are getting caught up online that is basically encouraging this sense of disconnection? And is that mainly how people are having relationships, online? And maybe the lack of those deeper human relationships could have something to do with why people seem to be relating to each other with less empathy and kindness.
I mean, that seems to be one of the bigger factors is, everybody has their phone, everybody interacts in these ways that are not ways that humanity has ever interacted in the past.
Right.
So it's like brand new territory as to how our brains will work with this, and evolution takes time for us to adapt to things like this. I mean, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, just the ways that we interact now, especially kids that are brought up interacting the ways that they do with each other, the lack of human interaction. What sort of world are we creating here? What sort of evidence are we seeing of this? Seems to be a slightly different group of folks that are coming up because of the conditions in which they're growing up around.
I think it's really changing brains, and we don't know a lot about how, because we don't have long-term data on all that yet. But I think people's ability to, have practical level social skills in real social environments is probably altered. I definitely see a lot of impact when it comes to young men and their use of internet porn, and then their ability to date women, real life women, and to learn how to talk and how to build connections and friendships and how to ask people out and how to do those early phases of how do you explore sexuality with your partner. They think everything is supposed to work like a porn movie, and that's concerning. And so that's, I think, for me as a therapist, that's where it shows up a lot, that we're seeing a very different kind of young man because of the internet porn.
That's a really interesting point.
And that's an interesting point on this. A lot of people are jumping to conclusions that this was some sort of a romantic relationship that was going on between David and Celeste, and now she's dead, so it must be the partner. And again, he's never been charged with anything. We don't know what actually happened here. We also don't know if they were in a romantic relationship as well. That seems to be a very quick thing that the internet is jumping to as a conclusion. Society is jumping to as a conclusion. I would argue maybe there wasn't a romantic relationship here at all. This was a friend. This was someone that maybe, he was confiding in. There's a lot of, guys that are friends with women that it's not a sexual relationship, and it's completely normal. And they can be straight, they can be gay. It doesn't really matter. But I think that seems to be another area that people are jumping to conclusion on here a little fast. What's your thoughts on that in terms of there being a romantic tie here, or if that's just us or society trying to fill in the blanks of questions where we have blank spaces?
Well, as you said, there's a lot of blank spaces, but there are areas of concern. And I did find, I had to look for it, but I did find the deleted live stream video of David with Celeste. And she was clearly a child. He clearly seemed to be in control. There was a lot of concerning body language going on, and there did seem to be quite a degree of intimacy between the two of them. She was a runaway, a vulnerable kid, obviously had much less power in the world than he has. And I can, raise my eyebrows. It was something I think if I were investigating this, I would certainly be looking very closely at that relationship.
I mean, it makes you think, like, what's going through your mind? Why are you bringing in, and it's probably not, they're not thinking of it in these ways, of you're bringing in a runaway, the person should be either reunited with their family or get help if the family's not a safe place to be, whatever it may be. We don't know the answers to all those questions. But the thought is, well, let's basically kind of make her part of the posse here. And do live streams with her. This girl that's supposedly missing. Again, that's another thing where are they just completely void of thinking of this in reality's terms of what's going on around them? Is this just, she's just another person? I mean, and at that age too, you're 20, it was not that long ago, you were 15. It was like literally 5 years ago. So you are still fairly immature in your thinking, and you may have friends who are of that age too. That's not unheard of at that point in time. So what do you think is going on in the minds of people like this, especially in that live stream, just knowing what we know now, that she was missing at that time, supposedly. He's someone that has some money, some power, some clout going on. What the hell are you doing live streams with a runaway for? I mean, what is... Good question. I mean, what... It's just, I can't picture this like happening as blatantly as it is today 10, 20 years ago. R. Kelly, as monstrous as he was, I don't see him like jumping on live streams if the ability was there all those years ago with people that were known to be like missing. It's kind of unfathomable.
Yeah, and the other thing that stood out for me with the live stream was near the end of it when he said, we've got to delete this. How do we delete this?
Yeah.
And there's some consciousness of maybe I just blew it here, and how do we get rid of it? So
yeah.
That also, it definitely, I can see why the public would be going there with the fears. And if I were investigating the case, I'd sure be looking at it. Was there a relationship here? Because even though, yes, it is normal for 20-year-olds to still hang out and be friends with younger people, it's also very normal for older males to sexually exploit younger females. Sure. And she was a beautiful young woman, and that would not surprise anybody, I don't think, if that were happening.
No, whether it was him or someone in the group, I would not be surprised if that was happening. I don't know, who or what or if at all, but obviously that could possibly be part of this. We don't have the answers to any of that. Yeah. You've worked with a lot of young people in your life. I mean, what are some of the common patterns that you've seen in their thinking right after a crime? Do they truly believe that they can outsmart detection, or is it more like magical thinking under duress?
You can certainly see magical thinking, which is that tendency to believe that just because I want something really bad, or I pray, or I do some kind of ritual, that it's going to go my way. And that, again, is something that a lot of people carry into adulthood. But there can be that. And sometimes there's an awareness that I'm probably going to get caught, but I'm going to delay it for as long as I can. And so when they get caught, they're not really surprised. So it can go either way with that. But yeah, the poor judgment of whoever thought leaving a body in a trunk and then leaving the car in a public place, that this was a good idea, there was something wrong. The other thing that popped into my head as a possibility, kids, partying, drugs, alcohol, could this have been something where somebody was even in a blackout and did something really stupid, and then the next day doesn't even recall what they did and how it happened? That could account for really bad judgment too, because sometimes people do really stupid things in a blackout and they just don't have any recollection of what they did.
It makes you wonder, because you don't know what went on, and all those things run through my mind as well. The fact that the last known photo of her, proof of being alive, basically, was January 2nd. Does that time of year, does that say anything to you about this case, of what may have went down? I mean, just pure speculation. We obviously don't know. But right after New Year's, I don't know. I mean, that's a time where, a lot of change happens around us.
Yeah, a lot of times weird things do happen in January because there has been so much, if we look at substance use, so much of that going on over the holidays. I used to always joke that you were going to get all the calls from couples needing marital therapy in January because people had behaved so badly at the New Year's Eve party. So
I've seen that.
And that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just so many questions here in this case that we just do not know the answers to, and likely never will. Or who knows what will eventually come out as the investigation continues. They did hire a private investigator. The owner of the house that David was allegedly renting has hired a private investigator, to which the way he's describing it, and I'm paraphrasing here, the private investigator is claiming he found notes inside of that house. We don't know if they were digital, if they were on a hard drive of some sort, or if they were on print, that described horrific things, very sadistic things, is the way I believe the term that he used, involving Celeste. And I guess there's two ways of looking at that, of sadistic and dark, meaning when she was alive or after she died. Things to dispose of a body and not be caught, or things that you would do to a living person. Again, disturbing either way, really. But does the judgment change in people's minds, especially young people's minds, I guess? When we're talking about the lack of the prefrontal cortex, from when a person is living to when the person is deceased. I guess the defining factor here is how they died. If it was an accident, if they overdosed on something, if they took their own life, and now this is a problem. The term is also the Celeste problem that was used by the PI, meaning we have a 15-year-old girl that's dead with us, and now we don't know what to do because she was a runaway and we were harboring a runaway. What do we do with that? In terms of what people are capable of doing, do people start dehumanizing that individual upon death?
Certainly possible. It could also be that this, again, are we looking at just youth and stupid youthful behavior, impulsive, poorly thought out, lack of problem-solving skills? Are we looking at that, or are we looking at something darker, where there is something more exploitative and psychopathic and cruel going on? And I can also see why the public would make a leap in that direction based upon some of the song lyrics, Right. And again, we look at all these things in the context, and writing a song about wanting to kill somebody does not necessarily mean you're going to go out and kill people, or that you even fantasize about it. But there is that concept of leakage, which as we've talked about so many times, when the internal thoughts and emotions that a person have comes out in their conversation, maybe in their internet things they write, or in art that they create. And that would include song lyrics too. And so if people have written songs about murder, and then there's a dead body found, of course, people are going to make the leap. Did that song, was that leakage? Is this something that was actually part of your fantasy that you had been thinking about?
He had the song that came out in 2022, "Romantic Homicide." So obviously, this would have been way before any of this had taken place. It's dark. It's it's the type of music that he made. I've heard the term the other day for the first time, sad boy music. There's sad girl music, and I know we've seen that forever, but sad boy music, and that's kind of what his music was. It was dark, it was sad, it was somewhat disturbing R&B music about loss, about tragedy, about trying to deal with the thoughts and emotions and the feelings, all that's there. And then we hear, and again, this is another big piece of the unconfirmed, we don't know the details, that there was lyrics or part of a song that was created, written, found somewhere, called Celeste. If in fact he wrote a song, again, big if this happened, if he wrote a song for her, knowing that she was dead and that the body was somewhere with his crew, that's another big weird one of like, oh, we're gonna take this through our art and we're gonna make music about it. It seems like such weird magical thinking of what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you creating this song about someone, a death that this girl is missing? It blows your mind. It really does. And the fact that someone would do that, let's say he did do that, what does that say?
Some people are very unaware of what they're leaking out, and they're continually processing. This may be true for artists very much so, maybe that they're constantly doing this internal processing and taking it external. So they're creating certain kinds of paintings, creating certain kinds of poetry, certain kinds of songs, always based upon what's cooking in their head. And so it could just be the lack of awareness. Gee, what's cooking in my head? Maybe I need to keep that to myself.
Yeah. That lack of awareness seems to be key in so many of these cases.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast. This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
We're talking about the David case and Celeste Rivas, her body, of course, being found in the frunk of a Tesla that was connected to singer David. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, with us, breaking all of this down. We were talking about how this appears to have been handled, and we're going back to January 2nd being the last date that there appears to be any evidence of life for Celeste Rivas that's out there. Prior to that, there's security camera footage, there's the door cam. There's all sorts of places where it appears she's showing up here and there, even though missing was her status for quite some time. You were talking about New Year's being a big day for this sort of thing to be happening. I can think of some other cases of the Anna Walsh. There was that murder there that was on January 1st. January 1st being a day that this sort of thing, I guess we see more of it. Is that accurate for New Year's?
Yeah, absolutely. You see more things happen. First of all, unfortunately, you see a spike in people taking their lives. You see a spike because of the partying and everything involved, gunshots and celebrating that gets out of hand. And so you see a spike there. You see some people who are trying to turn over a whole new leaf. And that means they're starting a different sort of life or taking care of business, whether that means a divorce, or whether that means walking away from a relationship, or whether that means, unfortunately, in some cases, a murder. So all of that, it's just this time of year that is definitely on law enforcement radar, always.
If we're talking about a cover-up, and this is where I'm starting to wonder about here, is if, because I don't know, it's hard to believe, I mean, that this would have been intentional. He has a thriving career he's up and coming. Things are going good. I don't think anybody would necessarily go, hey, let's go kill this girl. This seems like a great idea right now for everybody, and we'll get away with it. That's why my gut on this just keeps telling me like something happened, like accident of some sort took place. Whatever that accident was, or whether it's self-inflicted or not, I don't know. But I'm kind of on that mindset. And if you're young and dumb, and I don't know who would have been around her at that point in time on January 2nd or right around there, whether it was David or his entourage, his friends, whoever it may be. They're not making the best of choices, and she's 15. They already know they have basically a 15-year-old runaway. They are all of age, so they're basically harboring this runaway for all this time who is a minor. And of course, there's all the questions about, was there something sexual going on too? And that's all, I think, very much up in the air. I don't think we know the answer to that, other than people were assuming that she was older and that they were in a relationship. Still not a lot of evidence to show that they actually were. Is it something maybe where it's a panic and a cover-up because they needed to cover up they were harboring this 15-year-old runaway, and they're thinking, well, that will be worse than the body, and it just keeps covering up bad behavior after bad behavior with young dumb people.
It feels pretty plausible. You know, we're living on the generation that I like to run around claiming, you know, being Gen X, we know how to fix things, we know how to take care of our situations because we always had to. I don't know that this generation can do that, and I'm not putting a blanket
all of them,
statement.
but certainly some are not the wisest.
Correct. You know, I mean, they can hit a button on their phone and get food delivered. We couldn't do that. We had to get on our bikes or walk to McDonald's to get the food. So maybe they panicked. Maybe something did happen, and they had no idea what the hell to do.
Well, we have some new clues now. At least,
what do we have?
If we believe the PI, the PI and his rendition of what he found.
Okay.
Right? Sadistic. They had plans for her, what they were going to do to her. Now, he makes
alive or dead, though? That's the question.
Well, that is a question. How I interpreted it was alive. How they were going to, that's how I interpreted what he said, but everybody's free to their own interpretation. But what he talks about, it's, being mind-blowing and just unimaginable, essentially, what their plans were for Celeste. And I think that's a pretty good near quote of what he says. But he also makes it clear that he knows they didn't do those plans, right? And he probably knows that because whatever those plans meant, Celeste would have ended up someplace else, or Celeste would have ended up with a gunshot wound, or whatever it was in the plan that he's not seeing now in the proof that she's dead in the frunk. So I get that it doesn't line up, and he made the point, law enforcement can't arrest somebody for what they plan to do when it's clear they didn't do that. But it also, to me, sheds light on a darkness that I don't think we necessarily knew. The other thing is, Tony, and you and I have talked about this, in a court of law, I agree with you that some of this lyric, the blood, these videos, him dragging a body and throwing it in the trunk, that can't be used possibly in a court of law. It's going to be up to a judge. It's probably too prejudicial. But you know what? That doesn't mean that he was not imitating in his art life what he wanted in his life, especially now that we have a dead Celeste.
This could be the ultimate art project. A lot of people who are really artistic, they take things into the real world. I know a lot of artists who do. So could this be?
I think that's a stretch.
Well, who knows?
What the homicide song, what romantic homicide?
Romantic homicide. And
what was I want to know what the release 2022.
But what if he didn't see her as a real person? If she was his muse?
Well, 2022, he would have known her, at least over internet, would have been grooming her.
Well,
Yeah.
I was curious about the release date of it. Like, was this, because I didn't know if it was created in this last year, because January 2nd is almost a year ago now. If it would have been something within that timeline. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it could be a post thing, but it would have been even worse if it would have been like, oh, it came out in July of this year.
Oh,
It
I
did not.
agree.
Yeah.
Tony, I want to give you just a little snippet of that lyric.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, I killed you, and I didn't even regret it. I can't believe I said, but it's true. I hate you. It's just dark.
It is dark. A lot of music is dark, though. A lot of artists are dark.
That's
The coincidence, if it is a coincidence, of what and not that he's being accused of anything right now, but the fact that his proximity to something this dark and his lyrics match up to very dark concepts certainly does not look good. It does not play well for him. I know, or his crew or his entourage. But again, there's so many people involved in something like this, and in a crew like this. It's not usually just the artist that's there by themselves, and that's why I'm it's going to be so key to understand. It looks like the PI is already starting to get into that of who had possession of the car. You know, did they know what was in the car? What were they doing? What was their relationship? But we're also learning from what you were saying earlier, a lot of social media disappearing and some just kind of behind the scenes things and actions that seem to have taken place that don't necessarily point to a crime per se, but they point to someone not wanting to necessarily be looked at either. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I wrote a list actually of, to me, the key points that he's done after this that just don't look good.
Yeah.
First of all, he cancels all of his tour dates.
Yeah.
This is a lot of money. This is a lot of time preparation to get these dates overseas and everything. That is a huge clue to me. Number two, he erases multiple social media posts. That's very concerning. Anything that looked concerning, it's gone. He moves from the house where he was residing and paying $20,000 a month. He breaks that lease. Another very costly decision. His complete silence. And I say this because of this. It's not going to hurt him in terms of being looked at as committing a crime if he just simply comes out with a written statement. It can even be from his lawyer that says something to the effect of, Celeste was such a dear friend of mine. I am so, broken up with the loss of her life. Something as simple as that, but it's been complete silence. Then he wasn't at the funeral, which I think we all kind of expected. He retained counsel, which he should have. Everybody should. But I can tell you, so many people that are innocent and know they're innocent and can explain their whereabouts, they don't get counsel because they know they're innocent and they don't want to waste the money. Secondarily, that just happened, he transfers his property to Mama, at least 2 places in Texas. I just think all of that doesn't bode well for how he's appearing.
No, I mean, it does not bode well for how he's appearing at all. But at the same point, also, I would argue, and I've made some videos about this too, where it is also the movements of someone who is trying to protect themselves if they're being accused of something, even if they didn't do it. You would do these things. You would move property. Because you don't know what is ahead, what possible charges could come at you. Even if you have nothing to do with this, the shitstorm is on the way. Batten down the hatches, whether you invited it in or not. And some of that does seem to make some sort of sense. I do wonder about the tour and all of that. I know the dates were canceled, but there's obviously it's another thing where the system is involved. There's a lot of people involved in that decision. It's not necessarily just David alone that would be making that call. I would be wondering if there's promoters, the promoter got involved, whoever got involved and said, we're not gonna put any more money into this because all of this is going on over here. I'd be curious how much of a hand David had in making those choices of canceling the tour, of delaying the album, of doing those sort of things, things that involved the company, that literally the corporation of whatever David is labeled as, and those decisions being made, and who was making them, and for what reasons. I think that plays a big part in something like this too.
I agree. And I'm glad you're doing devil's advocate, because you make a lot of good points. I still say, if I'm David and I have millions upon millions upon millions that are going to be possibly earned, I mean, look at the magnification of his social media songs. Everybody wants to hear them. People that would have never listened to them are. I mean, he's got millions of hits every month that he wouldn't have had but for all of this blowing up. Can you imagine the concert goers?
Yeah, I mean, he would sell out right now. Honestly, I mean, R. Kelly was selling out until he was put behind bars, and literally, and everybody knew what was going on there. So yeah, I mean, I would think it'd be more of a personal type decision. If you had nothing to do with this and you know you're going to be vindicated, yeah, keep going and keep making your money. Why stop if you had nothing to do with it? Why do you want this to hold you down? And also, but then make a statement about it. Make something where, you're hurting just as much if you have nothing to do with this. That, I think, would be very powerful. And I mean, there's a lot of ways this could be played depending on what exactly happened. And I'm not saying played in a way of manipulating the system, but if this was an accident, if this was an overdose, if this was a this or a that, I mean, it could be used for awareness. I mean, it could be used for, hey, this is really sad and horrible. My friend died this way. But unfortunately, so many bad decisions seem to have been made right after she died. However, that may have been, that there's no way around that anymore. And it's just covering for bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And here we sit.
Well, and don't forget that lyric, at least in his playing it out, he murdered and he didn't regret it. So that to me plays into the psyche, because now we don't have any sign of remorse, not even a sentence that's out to the public. We don't publicly, but legally, any attorney is going to tell him to shut the F up. And he seems to be listening to whoever attorney he has that would likely be saying that. I mean, as much as we on the outside would want to hear more, as much as his family would probably want to hear more, as much as his fans would want to hear more, it's the silence, the unknown that makes this case really what it is. Because when it's unknown, things can kind of fester and go everywhere. Are you surprised we have not, at this point now, I mean, we're about damn near like 2 months into this thing, and still we don't have any charges against anybody. Are you surprised we haven't heard anything out of the David camp of any type, of any magnitude? Well, no, I'm not surprised, only because of the condition of her body. By the way, I wanted to say that very early on, again, back to this very early on reporting, NBC reported that according to the LAPD, and that actually, I think it said the sheriff's office. It said the sheriff's office, that this was a homicide. So a lot of people wonder why it was, deemed a homicide initially. And I can tell you that reporting went clear back to NBC and their interview of the sheriff's office. I just wanted to say that. But as of the most recent reporting, LAPD says, listen, we don't have manner of death, which would be accident, suicide, homicide, the like, and we don't have cause of death. They don't have cause of death, Tony, because it's going to take forever for a forensics examiner, an anthropologist, literally an anthropologist, to try to figure out how she died and exactly when she died.
So many questions in this, and not a lot of answers as to where all of this goes from here. Let me ask you this one more question. How often do you see it when you have a property owner like this, big house renting out? I mean, it's a weird, not probably a super common situation, but were you surprised that he hired a PI? The owner of the house decided to hire a PI, and I'm wondering why he decided to hire a PI. Was it because of the lack of information that he was getting to begin with?
Well, I have that answer for you.
All right.
First of all, let me go to question one. Is this usual? And it's very unusual. And I'll tell you why it's unusual. First of all, these homeowners just want this to go away from their end of it.
Yeah.
And they don't really want a big deal. They don't want all this out in the news. They want to rent that house again.
Yeah.
They don't want this to be, out there, especially blown up now that it's become. Second of all, this PI, and I want to give particularly what he said. He said he first started snooping around, right? He was taking pictures, he was getting with neighbors, he was pulling surveillance tape and so forth. So he contacted the owner of the house. The owner of the house, they got into a discussion about the search warrant return and search warrant inventory. And the search warrant, the landlord never got that, which is typical because you would serve that, you would leave it there at the home, or you would give it to the renter if he was there. That's what we're obligated to do as law enforcement.
Yeah.
The PI, I don't think understood that, and he attempted to try to go get a copy for the landlord. He, of course, was shut down by LAPD, and he went back to the landlord, but he did this good deed, if you will, for the landlord. And then I think at that point, he said, listen, I'm sure a conversation took place between the landlord and the PI, obviously, because he was hired, and maybe the PI suggested he would get a PI. We don't know for sure, but I'm just going on kind of the order and what he said. So, I understand the landlord maybe wanting to get some answers. I just can't imagine the landlord would want this blasted all over national television as it has been.
What do we know about the cameras in the house, though, too? I know there was some speak of that from the PI this weekend.
Yeah, this was really interesting. He says that, quote unquote, this was a sophisticated surveillance system. Now, he said that you could tell when people came into doors and opened windows and things. I wouldn't call that a sophisticated system, but maybe there was more to it. A sophisticated system to me is multiple cameras that are motion operated, that I can remotely look on my phone and actually see what each camera is doing and what's happening. I can control the camera and say, okay, listen, I want it to pan clear over here. I don't know how sophisticated this particular system was, but the PI believes that it was utilized by David. He says that because he says that they covered up the smoke sensor piece of the system. And he says they did that. This is according to the PI. He believes they did that because of what was going on in the house. And he also then speculated that they likely covered up the camera portions to hide what was going on in the house. That's his speculative side. But the side he knows about is the smoke. And I have to say, I agree with him. I think if they were astute enough to cover up the smoke detector side, they might have covered up the camera side.
I don't know. I think they were covering it because they were probably smoking weed.
Yeah,
they didn't, and they didn't want the smoke detectors to go off. I think that may be a very simple explanation. And if the smoke detector is connected to the camera, you're inevitably going to cover the camera simultaneously, not because you're trying to cover necessarily that you're smoking weed on camera, because it is legal there. You just don't want the smoke detectors to go off. That's my guess. I don't know.
I agree with you. And we don't know what else they were smoking. I mean,
or whatever it may be, whatever substance it may be. Yeah.
Substances. And, this is back to your point about kind of dumb people doing dumb things that we see all the time in true crime. By all accounts, there were substances involved.
Sure.
By all accounts. So now you even have less of good judgment like going on with whatever went on. So you add to it youth, you add to it inexperience, you add to it something heinous that happened to that poor girl. Yeah. And then you put on top of it substances.
Sure. There's a lot of things. Yeah. There's so many things in this case where it's like, just because they look like this might not be exactly what they are. And it's hard to, because some things just are what they are, and they're just certain. And some, objects in the rear view mirror may not be as close as they appear. I feel like that there's a lot of that in this case, and not necessarily intentional. I think some of it is just youthful stupidity that is mixed in with all these other elements. So many questions here. Jennifer Coffindaffer, as always, thank you for coming on and giving us your insight into this. I know you're following it very closely. Break the Case is her podcast. You can get it wherever you get podcasts. Just search Break the Case, Jennifer Coffindaffer on YouTube, or like I said, wherever you get podcasts. That's going to wrap up this episode. Until next time, for Todd and Stacy and Jen, I'm Tony Brueski. We will talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.